of like Catholic media and online personalities and apologetics and all these things. Do you think it's mostly, a net positive for the church, or do you have concerns about it?
Well, I think that it's hard to paint with a broad brush. I think that there's a lot of people. 'Cause I think what's most important. This is something that a lot of people will say. There's a lot of people doing good, and there's a lot of people
Mm,
doing bad. I think
mm,
that's a wrong way of looking at it. I think that there's most people are doing both good and bad. I think that
mm,
it's more so of a spectrum. There's people who 98% of their stuff is awesome. There's a video here and there where it's just like they shouldn't be doing that. And then
yeah.
there's other people, maybe 50% of the stuff that they're doing is really bad, and then 50% of the stuff they're doing is really good. And those
Mm,
sort of people, I think, end up being a sign of contradiction in a way. And I
mm.
think those people end up being the most interesting because there's a lot of people who will focus on the good and appreciate
Yeah.
the good, and there's a lot of people who will
Yeah.
focus on the bad and not be able to appreciate the good.
Mm,
So yeah, my perception of Catholic media is definitely that there's a necessary expansion that needs to happen. There's a
okay.
necessary diversification that needs to happen. A lot of people need to recognize that Catholic content is not a monolith, nor should it be a monolith. Not everybody needs to
Mm,
get into apologetics and making theology content. There's actually a lot of spaces where there aren't Catholics, uh, there,
mm,
and Catholics need to be there. And if you have, and the biggest thing that I think is probably the chief problem, if I had to kind of put my finger on it, is a lot of people betray their initial vision. There's
yeah.
so many people out there. I'll give an example. And I won't name anybody. Don't worry. But I'll give an example. Recently, I've done a few things that are uh, ordered more towards like explaining scripture. I've done a lot of theology stuff, a lot of apologetics, polemic stuff, and I had an interview with two other people. We did something where we just talked about Genesis for like 3 hours, and it was an awesome conversation. I think a lot of people said it was like one of the best episodes of mine that they've ever watched. And they said, and somebody in the comments basically brought up the point: why isn't there anybody doing scripture content? And it's a very interesting question. There are a lot of Protestants who do scripture content. There's a lot of good Protestants actually, good content rather from the Protestants
Hmm.
when it comes to scripture. But the reason why people aren't doing scripture content, the reason that I don't think anybody in the sort of Catholic influencer sphere want to admit, is because there are people who tried to do scripture content who realized that it wasn't profitable.
Yeah.
That's what I've talked to these people before.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've literally talked to them, and I've heard people say, "I wanted my original vision for my channel was to do scripture content, but I realized I couldn't get views on it and I couldn't get support on it.
Yeah.
Therefore, I abandoned it." And that's really sad
Mm,
because what
yeah.
happens for a lot of people is they end up getting clicks is a good thing. Getting watch hours is a good thing. Getting people involved and invested is a good thing, but you kind of have to
Mm,
realize that that is a means to an end. Getting clicks is good because it's getting clicks on good content. So you want good
yeah.
content to get viewed by a lot of people. That's a very important thing. But you shouldn't be making
Hmm.
content in order to get the views. That puts the cart before the horse. So
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, what they haven't recognized is that the reason we don't have content in certain spheres is because people have tried that and they recognized that it wasn't profitable, so they moved on to other stuff. And I think this is part of a sort of differing business model that needs to happen, which is like I think out of the scope of the conversation. But I think people need to
Mm.
rethink the way in which they enter into content, the way in which they keep their content going, etc.